Hello, everyone. This is Contested Layups. This is Eddie on Contested Layups, and thank you for joining us, episode number 60. And tonight we have a very special episode. We have Edward Shuler on from Bulls Gold. Also tonight we have Garnick and John, two regulars on our show. Raul's remote tonight too. So
yo, what's going on?
But so tonight we're gonna have a good full house tonight. And we are continuing our ascension up the Eastern and Western Conference. Tonight we have the 9 seed Chicago Bulls in the Eastern Conference, just missing the playoffs. Our hometown team here. We're all big Bulls fans on the show tonight, but we have them outside we're trying not to be as big of homers because we're trying to keep it realistic here. But anyway, the Bulls are our 9 seed coming into this 2018-2019 season. Last year, Chicago finished with 27 wins and 55 losses. Zach LaVine led the team with 16.7 points a game, Lauri Markkanen 15.2, and Kris Dunn third at 13.4. And the Bulls made many notable moves this offseason, signing Jabari Parker, drafting Wendell Carter, and then really just getting everyone together and keeping the same pretty much core that they had from last year. Something that Jim Boylan has talked about. Jim Boylan, the assistant associate head coach for the Bulls, he has talked about over the offseason that he's trying to establish a more consistent defensive mindset for this Bulls team coming up in the season, where they're not just taking it game by game and going on matchups, which is a great thing, I think, going forward. And that's what I wanted to get into next, guys. What do you think for the Bulls defensively coming into this year? Last year they were pretty atrocious defensively. I'll start with Garnick on this point. Do you think that this team can play at least league average defense? Do you think Kris Dunn can become more of a dog kind of defender, as you mentioned? Can Lauri Markkanen become kind of a pseudo rim protector with Wendell Carter in there? Or will the Bulls just be giving up over 115 points a game and just having it have to be a shootout every night? What do you think, Garnick?
Well, I think if you look at it from a standpoint of each player must have individual goals, not necessarily first and foremost, but they do have to prioritize them to an extent. I think for all the 4 players that we mentioned, we kind of know what we have offensively, and all 4 should prioritize defense. Having said that, Lauri and Dunn specifically, since I just kind of, in my mind, put them as 3rd and 4th top scorers,
right,
their priority should be defense. Specifically with Lauri, you already know what you have, even though he's still 20. You already know what you have with him on offense. He's going to develop on offense. It's going to come fairly naturally to him. The defense is the hard part. Now, this point is brought up with kind of a back view of last year. We have that background, and it is what it is. But you have to remember that last year, this team kind of semi on purpose didn't have an identity because they kept plugging players in just to see who's going to be the 10th or the 11th guy on this team when this team actually becomes something.
Right.
And none of the top 3 dogs really played more than 60 games, if I recall correctly.
Right.
For the whole year.
I think Markkanen played 68, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, more than 70, that is. That's, in my mind, that's part of the reason for lack of defense last year. They will improve this year. I don't think they'll make it to league average.
Okay.
I think they will have nights where they gel together and they work really well. And they'll obviously win more than last year. We all agree on that. But I think asking at least the 2 main pieces here, in Jabari and Zach LaVine, to really become average. I don't know. Well, with Jabari specifically, he's shown glimpses, but he's been in the league for some time now.
Right.
I think it's asking too much of them at this point.
Okay, Ed, you go ahead. Go ahead and take this one. Then we'll go to John.
I think defensively, this team, I fully expect them not to be very good at all. And here's why. Again, we're mentioning that this is a young team. So, as I mentioned in my previous response, I think a lot of this stuff is still a year away, maybe even 2. And defensively, a lot of these players on the roster don't come with the defensive awareness that it really takes to execute a great scheme. And we saw it some last year with Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine is not a bad man-to-man defender. If you put Zach LaVine on an island with a good scorer, he can hold his own. He'll play respectable defense. He moves his feet well. He's got a decent enough wingspan to contest the shot, and his athleticism, his freakish athleticism, really helps him in that regards. Like, he just moves really well on the floor, even after the ACL injury. The problem with LaVine and also Jabari Parker, Bobby Portis, and a few other players on the team is that they're not good at playing. They're not good at recognizing defense off the ball. Their awareness is really, really bad. And Zach LaVine will be late chasing someone around a screen because he's ball watching. And players won't recognize what to do with a pick and roll because they're slow to react. It doesn't click for them. And that's kind of why someone like Wendell Carter Jr. is very unique to this roster, because Wendell Carter Jr. is very advanced defensively for his age and reacts to everything quickly, has great footwork, doesn't ball watch, has great awareness. And that's the type of mentality that you kind of want to see on this team. It's almost reminiscent of how John Paxson built the Bulls before, when he first came to Chicago, when he had Kirk Heinrich, when he had Luol Deng, when he had Chris Duhon, Tyson Chandler, when he had players whose instinct was defensively. Their instinct was to respond defensively. And I think even though we have Chris Dunn, even though we have Wendell Carter Jr., and even though Lauri Markkanen was a better defender than we all expected last year, I still think it's a team-wide mentality that still has to develop. So while I'm interested to see how the new pick and roll coverages work for this team, because they've talked a lot about switching and trying to keep up with the modern NBA, where we're going to switch everything, we're going to utilize footwork, and we're going to, make sure that we can be positionless on the court. I'm still having trouble just seeing players like LaVine and Parker killing old habits so soon. And right now, I'm kind of expecting the Bulls to be very below average defensively. But my hope, and this is the hope just for the overall season, if they're below average defensively, they have to at least be average or above average on offense to compensate for it.
For sure. Yep. John, go ahead and take it.
Yeah, I agree with what everybody said here so far. I think it's mainly desire in order to play even average defense in the NBA. These guys got to have a desire to do that. And I think with the contracts that were given to both LaVine and Parker, the Bulls management said, look, we'll give you this money. We know what you can do on offense. We also expect you to play good defense, to bring and move this process forward for the future and for this coming season. So I don't expect them to be defensive stalwarts, but I do expect them to stay in front of their man, even if they get into a shootout, which is going to happen most nights, and they'll probably be on the short end of the stick in those shootouts. But I think it's just this is all part of the process. Let's remember that the Warriors, before they became a dynasty, they were trailing like teams like up to 20 points, and then they suddenly come back because they played decent defense. So right. I think that's where we're at with this right now in terms of the Bulls.
All right, Raul, you're up.
I guess I agree more with Garnick's side of things. I think maybe expecting LaVine and Jabari to all of a sudden miraculously become lockdown defenders is kind of unreasonable. At best, you could hope that their on-ball defense is serviceable, but also to Ed's point, they have to get better at off-ball defense. Just realizing, not ball watching, and just they got to get better on help too. Like they got to do all that. But I think I want to see one player out of these four, whether it's Kris Dunn, if it winds up being Zach LaVine or Jabari, which I don't think any of us can see that happening, or if it winds up being Laurie, I want to see one of these guys establish that defensive mentality and identity.
Right.
Okay. I want to see, and I kind of want to see it from Kris Dunn. Because to me, I think Kris Dunn is, from what I've seen of him on the court, he looks to be the most charismatic out of all these guys. You know, when he gets a run going, you feel that energy from him.
Right.
You feel that energy from him. Whereas LaVine would get it going a little bit, Laurie would get it going a little bit. You kind of, but not as much as you feel Dunn. Like you feel the hunger with Kris Dunn. And I think if he establishes that defensive mentality and just tells himself, like, look, or establishes himself as, like, look, I'm going to be the premier defender on this team. I'm going to be a premier defender in the league. And I'm going to pride myself on my defense more than anything in my game. I think that will rub off on some of these starters and some of the other Bulls. I think Wendell Carter is going to come in, and I think that he kind of has that mentality too. Mm-hmm. And if you could get these guys rolling and they could kind of feel themselves and get their confidence up, and you see Kris Dunn like locking people down, I think that will be kind of like the catalyst. That will be kind of the catalyst to get some of these guys more motivated to make whoever they're guarding work for it a little bit more. You know, if Jabari or Zach LaVine, let's say there's a stretch in the game where, hey, we got to lock down on defense, guys. They see Kris Dunn is doing his job. They're going to be, all right, let's go. They're going to take the challenge. Lauri Markkanen is, I hope that he does the same thing. And I expect, that's what I expect from the Bulls. Mm-hmm. I expect them to find that one guy and to kind of spread it all around. And yeah, we're not gonna have 4 Kawhi Leonards on the team. We know that, but a lot of defense is about effort and heart, right, and dedication. So if you just, if one of these guys shows that they want it bad enough, I think that's mainly what they need, and hopefully it doesn't just stop at one of these players. Hopefully, Hoiberg starts preaching it a lot more at the end of games, or just before games. Hopefully he tries to hammer it into these guys that it's, right now the expectation is that, hey, we're more of an offensive minded team. We're not the defensive minded team or whatever. We're not focused on defense. We're more focused on, we're going to try to outscore you. Maybe that's your mentality right now, but if you could get these guys at least just working hard on it, and you could get on them a little bit, I think that will go a long way. Because like you guys said, Jabari and Zach LaVine, they got paid the most money this offseason out of this Bulls team. They got to prove that they're worth that money. They got to prove that they're worth that spot, because the fans and the organization is expecting them to do so, and yeah, so if I think they all just need to do their part, and yeah, I'd like to see one of those guys establish a defensive identity.
Okay, all right. All you guys kind of hit on a collective point where it's an important year this year for the management and for everyone really to find out what is really going on with this roster, and Garnick really hit it on the head. Who the Bulls can have, or who the Bulls can take going forward into upcoming seasons. So this is a very important season for to see if Jabari Parker can live up to his draft status, and really if he's, if you just need to change the scenery to see if, Lauri Markkanen can be the focal point, if Zach LaVine can be the focal point, if Kris Dunn really is the point guard that the Bulls need. So I ask this question now to you guys, and I'll start with John on this answer, okay? How will this Bulls team look together? This will be our last question before we get into over-under. How will this Bulls team gel? Will the Bulls try to push the pace, or will they be more of a half-court team? What do you think? So start with the first part. Start with the latter portion, I guess. Will the Bulls be a run and gun kind of team? Will they try and slow it down and run some half-court offense a lot of the time? Or will they just try and push the pace, and then will they be able to gel together? Go ahead, John.
Well, they want to be a decent base type team, right?
That's what Hoiberg tries to do.
Was it Hoiberg?
Stop. But before we digress, I think they should run.
Okay.
I think they should run. Trying to go strictly half court right away in the beginning of the season, I think it's not the smartest thing to do. Simply because there's a lot of new pieces, such as Jabari, and obviously they have to integrate Wendell Carter, and it's gonna be hard. People don't know where to go on the half court, and by running, it kind of minimizes their thinking, and they just play.
Okay.
So I think they should run first. And what was the second question?
And will this team gel together? Will they play for each other, basically?
I think in the second half of the season, because I personally think that they're not going to be anywhere close to playoff contention. And I think this is the year where they, finally get to know each other, and it won't happen till the second half of the season, in my opinion.
Okay,
so that's how I feel about it.
Okay, Garrett, go ahead.
To be honest with you, I do believe they're going to be more kind of pace and space oriented. I think their priority is to be a fast team and utilize the assets at their disposal. All of them are fairly young. Just about all of them are fairly young and capable of just running all day. And that's their priority. But I don't think it should be a priority, because this team will be able to score with a lot of teams. And whether it's half court or, trying to fast break as much as possible, they'll get theirs on offense. The gel part is where I'm concerned. Ideally, it should take only 20 games for them to kind of all get in line, or identify their own individual roles. I think maybe at the top that's what will happen, but going from 3 to 8, I think it's going to be a lot of trial and error, probably for most of the season. Now, John mentioned playoff aspirations and how he doesn't think they'll make it all that far, and I think that's a point we all need to kind of discuss. I think by default they will be at least a 10 seed.
Right, yeah. That's why I have them at 9, but yeah, continue.
Right. Again, by default, the East is just so weak. It's kind of unfortunate, really. I mean, if you look at Charlotte, if you look at Cleveland.
Right.
Yeah. So, again, this whole season should be all about defense, in my humble opinion.
Okay, Raul. Go ahead, man.
This is kind of tricky because, obviously with LaVine playing more and Jabari coming in, they're very capable, I think, in a half-court set, especially in an ISO situation. And then also you have Lauri Markkanen, who has a certain set of skills. Shout out to Liam Neeson.
Nice.
But yeah, so it's kind of interesting because they are young and they can run, but then again, they're also probably pretty good at ISO too, and might even work out better in the half court offense. But maybe it needs to be a healthy mix of both, with more towards transition offense.
Okay.
And just trying to play fast. One thing's for sure, I want them to play fast. I want them to play fast. Not a lot of if you're gonna get yourself into an ISO situation, I don't want you to wind down the clock when there's only 5 seconds left. Like, that's I've never thought that's good. I don't want to see Zach LaVine caught up in a situation where he's just dribbling the ball around his defender, and then there's 5 seconds left and he just takes like a stupid jumper. And I definitely don't want to see that from Jabari Parker either. But I think they're more than capable of being able to get off good shots in an ISO situation with a decent amount of time in the clock, and so that they can allow themselves to get more possessions per game. And I think that's how they're gonna be successful with that. And then if you can, and then you use your youth and you use your speed. Hopefully everybody's knees are all good, because this is a team all with knee injuries. So, hopefully their knees are strong and healthy, and we can get them running a bit. And I'd like to see, a lot more fast breaks. I think we all want to see Zach LaVine just have a dunkathon. Just most games.
Yeah.
Most games we want to see Zach LaVine just dunking on everybody. And I think I think I want to see them have a healthy mix of both, I guess, with more run and gun, and just but I won't be mad. I won't be mad if I see Jabari taking advantage of people on the block, because I know that he can.
Do you think this team can come together? Do you think this team can come together well? Like, do you think these guys can really gel together?
I think so. I think from afar, to me personally, it kind of looks like a kind of like pieces of a puzzle that fit together well.
Okay.
From far away, you have Kris Dunn, who is the kind of point guard that you need for this team. We all know that he's not the star player. We all know that he's not the star player, but he's going to become a more than serviceable point guard, defensive minded. He'll chip in maybe 15 points a game when he reaches his potential, 15 and a half, somewhere around there, with maybe assist totals of like 6 to 7, hopefully. And you look at your shooting guard position, and Zach LaVine's there, and that's what you kind of want to see as a shooting guard. You want to see at least somebody with his potential. And you look at Jabari, who, he was injured, but if he wasn't injured, he'd be kind of a prototypical small forward. He's a big body, long wingspan, pretty tall, like pretty big, athletic, and he can run, and he's really skilled, just decent shot. So, and you have Markkanen, who's your stretch 4. These are all, when I look at this team, that's what you're trying to get at. This is the kind of team that you're trying to get at. These pieces that you have. You have your stretch 4. You even have, hopefully a good, solid center. Wendell Carter is very skilled. Very skilled. He for sure he needs to work on his offensive game. But if he does, he could be your classic center right there. So this is like your starting lineup that you want.
Right.
So for me, I think they should be able to work well together. If they don't work well together, it's probably going to be because of something else, something more than basketball.
Okay. Okay. All right, Ed, go ahead.
I think you guys nailed it. This is a team that needs to push the pace. They need to spread the floor, and they need to make use of a young roster. And while I don't think they'll be dreadful in the half court, I feel like that would just be a terrible use of their talent, their skill, and their youth. As far as how long it's going to take for them to gel, it's kind of a tricky question because it could take anywhere really from 20, 25 games to really the entire season. I think sometimes there's an impression that, pieces have to gel at some point. But, there's also the realization that some pieces just never gel. And while it's a different type of structure, we can look back to the Jimmy Butler, Dwayne Wade, Rajon Rondo teams where that roster never really gelled together. It honestly didn't really show any type of chemistry until Rajon Rondo went to the bench and played with 4 players who fit his talent and skill level better. And then Jimmy Butler and Dwayne Wade kind of played, hero ball with one another. They just kind of bounced the ball, between one another to play their game. So it was almost like you were staggering minutes and staggering lineups there to get that to work. So I hope that doesn't happen with this team, but I could definitely see a scenario where this team really doesn't gel until maybe even next season, if that. And, the best case scenario is, maybe a result where the 2004-2005 Bulls, where I think they started 0-9 and ended up winning 47 games or something like that and made the playoffs with Dang, Heinrich, Gordon, Chandler, Curry, all those guys. So maybe that's the best case scenario. But to me, I'm fully expecting this to take a little while. I'm fine with it taking its time to hopefully gel, even though I do have questions about the fit with Parker and Levine and everybody in that lineup. But I could really see this taking all season. Like I feel like we could be in March or April still wondering why this isn't working. And maybe maybe the season after that, we come in thinking, okay, now it's starting to come together. Now we maybe see what the front office was thinking. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. There's a variety of ways that it could.
Okay, yeah, Ed, that's a good point to make, that it might not happen this upcoming season, and kind of, I mean, these guys are all very young and they still all need to establish themselves in the league, and that's hard to ask young players who are still, some of them on their rookie contracts, especially Dunn and Markin, and I really think, where they still need to kind of establish themselves to maybe not just John Paxson and Gar Forman, but to other potential GMs, just in case if they don't get re-signed on their restricted when their deal's up. So that's a good point, though, Ed, that they might just all be playing for themselves and not together. So, but we'll see what happens. So Ed, what we do on the show for each team that we preview, we give a over/under for total amount of wins, and then for the season. So I'm gonna have Garnick set the bar. Garnick, what's the bar? What do we got?
37.5.
37.5. Ed, what do you got? Over, under 37.5 for the Bulls?
I have under. I have them at 32 or 33 wins next season.
John, what do you got, man?
Ed, with you.
You're under?
I'm way under. I'm about where Ed is, 32, 33, realistically.
Okay.
It's not going to get much better than it did last year.
All right, Garnick, what do you got?
All right, you're going to make me go before you. I'm going to say over, and a lot of that can be attributed to default.
Okay.
They play against other East teams a lot, and a lot of those East teams are very, very weak, and someone has to make the playoffs as the 8th seed. I think they'll be close. I don't think they'll make it. I think 9 is the perfect spot for them. I've lobbied that for some time now.
Yep.
And I'm glad we're not being overly biased on the Bulls, our hometown team. I will say 39. And again, a lot of that is due to default. So
Okay.
I'm sticking to my point at 39.
All right, well, what do you got?
I'm just gonna go over slightly.
All right, what's the number?
38.
That plan is pretty safe, huh?
Yeah. I think 38 is pretty solid for them. They won 27 last year, an 11 game improvement. I am very happy with that.
All right. I am also saying over barely. I'm going to say 38. Actually, that was kind of a moment of I didn't know what I was going to say.
Moment of zen.
Yeah, moment of zen there. But I'm saying 38 for the Bulls. I think they are barely over the number we put, and I do think that the East is just that weak, where it's just you're going to see just the teams that are below them. When we were going over the rosters, I didn't see anything remotely I liked from any of those teams. And I just think the Bulls are, well, I think they're going to play harder, and I think they're going to be a little bit better. So that's what I got. Go ahead, Gary.
Ed, I just wanted to ask you a question. What do you expect out of Jabari and Kris Dunn specifically? And the reason why I bring up those two individuals is because those two are technically core players, but both of them are kind of on the bubble of the core, if there was such a thing. Kris Dunn is in the core because he was part of the Jimmy Butler trade and he was a high draft pick, but I get the feeling that the Bulls brass aren't really sold on him just yet. For that matter, I don't believe all the fans are sold on him just yet. And Jabari, he's a hometown kid, second pick overall, Duke. He has the pedigree. He missed a lot of time due to injuries over the course of his career. And ultimately, he's a one-year rental. So I just wanted to know what you think the Bulls will get out of those two players this year.
Bonus question. Go ahead, Ed.
I think Dunn is actually, well, not the player of most priority. I think Dunn is the biggest key to making all of this work. And Mark Karanzulas wrote a nice article about this on Bloggable, talking about how Dunn is a really big piece to this puzzle. And it's for two reasons. One, he's the point guard. So the offense is going to start with Kris Dunn most of the time. And he is going to have to get players involved. He's going to be the catalyst of everything. And when he doesn't have the ball, what does Kris Dunn now become? Because last year he kind of struggled with his three-point shot, and he wasn't really useful off the ball. And now, even though he is going to start the offense, there are going to be more situations as well where Dunn is going to have to be a threat off the ball. He'll have to develop some sort of catch and shoot three-point shot at a respectable level. And defensively, you guys alluded to it earlier, can Kris Dunn be a dog? And he's a fantastic defender. I love watching Kris Dunn defend the point guard. I think that is a luxury for the Bulls, considering there are not many great point defenders at the point guard position. So Dunn stands out with his tenacious defensive level and his motor, and he's just a ball hawk. He's pesky. I want to see more of that. And if he can do that, hit a 3-point shot off the ball, I think we're looking at a player who could be in the core. You know, Kris Dunn doesn't need to average 20 points a game and, 11 assists, but if he gives you 13 or 14 points, 7-8 assists, few steals, good defense, I think you're talking about a core player. As far as Jabari Parker goes, I fully expect Jabari Parker to get a lot of buckets next season. I mean, that's what he does. He's, even before the second ACL tear, he scored efficiently, shot the ball well. Even his three-point shot even got better. And Parker can score from anywhere on the floor. He's a very good scorer. He can score off the dribble. He can score in a multitude of ways. The key with Jabari Parker is what can you bring defensively, and that goes for Zach LaVine as well, as we mentioned. Can you be aware? Can you execute a scheme? Can you guard threes? Because the knock on Jabari Parker was he's too slow now to guard threes, and we have to play him at the 4. The Bulls are putting him at the 3. So that's very important. the Bulls are playing Jabari Parker as the starting 3, whereas in the past he was playing the 4 because his previous coaching regimes didn't believe he could guard the 3 full time anymore. So the Bulls are kind of going out on a limb here to see if Parker can really defend that position, can really slim down, can really improve his lateral quickness. If Parker can become a respectable defender on top of giving you above average offense, I think you have a core piece, and I think you have a player that can stick around at small forward. So I fully expect Parker to do really well on offense next season.
All right, cool. Do you have anything to add, Garner? No?
Not really, aside from the dynamic of Jabari Parker being a 1-year rental. I think that's a point that's somewhat understated in a sense that if there is a power struggle, if there is drama of any kind, he might be just shipped out of town as soon as possible because of that. Now, I don't anticipate that happening, or rather, I hope it doesn't happen, but I see potential for something like that to really preclude this team from developing as much as they want to develop this year. Specifically, going back to our first question with who's going to get the most buckets, again, in my opinion, it's going to be between Zach and Jabari, and Zach isn't going anywhere. And I think that could be really the biggest point here in this potential drama. And I'm kind of shooting from the hip when it comes to that specific point. But all things considered, this is the Bulls, Garpax, Hoiberg.
Yeah.
It could happen.
Okay.
And maybe I'm being a skeptic, but that's kind of the angle I was coming from.
Okay. All right, thanks, guys. Well, a little bonus question there for you listeners out there. All right, and then we're going to the Western Conference. So, Ed, you ready to talk about the former Bulls, the Minnesota Timberwolves, are our 9 seed for this upcoming season. The Timberwolves finished 47-35 last year. Actually, 22nd in team defensive rating, which is a stat that's kind of tough to gauge. But regardless, it's strange to see a Tom Thibodeau coach team finishing in the bottom third of the league in any defensive rating. Last year, Jimmy Butler was the leading scorer at 22 points a game, Karl Anthony Towns at 21, and Andrew Wiggins at 17. The Timberwolves made their first playoff appearance last year as an 8 seed, got blasted by the Houston Rockets in 5 games. And we have them at the 9 seed mainly because the West has improved that much. And the Timberwolves could make some internal improvements, but how the summer reportedly has been, it's been a little bit of friction. Also, the Timberwolves pieces that they added were just old Bulls. Luol Deng got signed this past week. Derrick Rose was re-signed. Taj Gibson's still there. Jimmy Butler's still there. And I'm sure, as I talked on your podcast, Ed, Joakim Noah's probably going to get signed once he gets waived by the Knicks. So the Minnesota Timberwolves are a 9 seed. Ed, I'm going to start with you for the first question here. What do you see from this team for this year? Do you think that what happened this summer with Jimmy Butler refusing to sign an extension with Minnesota and reportedly calling Karl Anthony Towns soft and all this reported infighting with this organization, do you think that's going to have an impact on this team this year, or do you just think it's a bunch of baloney and nothing's going to happen?
I think it's something. It's definitely something, and we were talking about this on the last episode of the podcast we did, that Thibodeau, the same things that happened in Chicago are happening in Minnesota, just without the success. So when the Bulls were really good, they were winning 60 games, and those rumors were out. There were rumors that, hey, players didn't like how Thibodeau was, working them hard. They needed a break. He was pushing them too hard. But we as Bulls fans looked at it as, hey, this team is winning 60 games, and they're arguably the best team in basketball, so who cares? But when the winning went away, then that stuff started to get louder, and then it ultimately ended up kind of, ending, the rest of that era after D Rose's injury. So I see a lot of the same things in Minnesota this year, and I definitely think it's something. I think Jimmy Butler does not mix long-term with Towns and Wiggins, and they're going to have to keep Towns around because he's their most valuable player. Yes, Butler's their best player, but Towns is the guy you're going to build around long term. This team, I don't see a high ceiling for them in the West. You mentioned it. The West is just a dogfight right now. There are 2 or 3 teams out there probably 2 teams. There are 2 teams that can win the NBA championship, and then there are just a ton of teams after that are really good. It's almost like if Minnesota was in the East, their ceiling would be a lot higher. You'd look at them like, okay, Minnesota might actually make a run in the East because there's not a lot there, but they're in the West, and they barely made the playoffs last season. It came down to a play-in game with the Denver Nuggets. Now, to be fair, Jimmy Butler did miss a few weeks that led up to that, but still, they're still on the fringe. They're hanging on, and I'm not sure, what's really going to come out of it, because they just don't have a roster to me, even with the addition of all these former Bulls, that really is Thibodeau's style. It's just not really a grinded out team that he wants. And the other thing is that Thibodeau just doesn't know how to play any other way. He doesn't know how to coach any other type of team. He has to have that type of roster. And if it doesn't work out that way, I just really don't see it succeeding at a high level. He just doesn't adapt, and it seems like the league has passed him by. It seems like people have, everyone uses his defensive schemes now, so his defensive schemes no longer stand out. So at this point, you're kind of just saying, well, since Towns and Wiggins aren't going to defend, we know they'll score. So, that's kind of the reality of Minnesota. This isn't the team that they want to be, but it's the team that they are by default because it doesn't seem like their best players, sans Jimmy Butler, have bought in.
I agree with Ed on every point. I think Thibodeau is running these guys down to the ground. And on top of that, there's really no accountability amongst the team. I guess you can say Jimmy's trying to take all the responsibilities as a leader, but even then, he wasn't really. I don't see him as a leader, as a type of person that could be a leader, and it was shown in Chicago. When you call out the coach out so publicly, how can anybody respect that? People still remember that,
right? And
you know who remembers that? Karl Anthony Towns.
Yep.
So in his shoes, how can you tell me? And Jimmy Butler through free agency, they're not running out players like that. You can get plenty of wing players like that, but okay. if you're gonna choose between Karl Anthony Towns or Jimmy Butler, I would choose Karl Anthony Towns all the way, all the time.
I don't think it's a matter of choice. Clearly, Jimmy Butler is taking that away from Thibodeau at this venture. I do agree with you that this team is imploding. It's kind of busting at the seams if you think about it. And the fact that Jimmy kind of put Cat on blast this offseason. This could be a conspiracy theory of mine. I'm kind of infamous for those around here. But I think that's LeBron and Rich Paul kind of working their magic behind the scenes. I think it's the long game. I think they're trying to get Jimmy to talk himself out of an extension and become kind of the option C for the Lakers next year.
Okay.
I don't think he's their primary option. But again, I digress. Going back to Minnesota, which is the question.
Yes.
Kind of put in my 2 cents about Jimmy. They need Karl Anthony Towns to really step the hell up this year.
Karl Anthony Towns.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Towns.
Continue.
Sorry. They need an. I was thinking of Anthony Thomas.
Bears running back. Wow.
It's bear season.
Yeah.
But they need Karl Anthony Townsend to really step up this year. He needs to make an Antonio Davis type Anthony Davis type
Nice.
Leap.
this year.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
That's their only way to respectability, and that's the only thing that would prevent this team from completely being blown up. Thibodeau is becoming a joke. I mean, you just signed Luol Deng. That's ridiculous. I mean, I think he's losing credibility in that locker room just from moves he's making as a GM. I think he's losing credibility around the league, and to add to John's point, the league probably has passed him by, and I don't anticipate Antonio Townsend,
Goodness.
Carlos Antonio Townsend to make a huge leap, but that's what would have to happen for them to not be blown up.
I agree with Garnick. It's really weird. You know, the thing is I think in general, whether it's the media or the fans' consensus or whatever, like Jimmy Butler, he didn't take a contract extension, and I think everybody was like, oh, well, he's just doing it like the same thing that he did when he was on the Bulls. When
Right,
they were,
yeah.
You know, I'm going to deny my extension and then, or reject my extension or whatever, and that's going to push up my value and I'm going to get paid more. And then you have Karl Anthony Towns, who he hasn't signed an extension yet, and that really hasn't gained any legs since it's been reported that he hasn't had the extension yet. That he hasn't even got like an offer or whatever. I think last time I heard, like, there was a potential offer, like 5 years, $158 million with a bonus that could get it up to 190 if he makes like the All-Star game or whatever, or makes an All-NBA team.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are thinking that, oh, well, he'll probably sign an extension. I think a lot of people are thinking that he's either going to sign an extension or he'll just not do it and they'll sell for more later. But I think the Timberwolves, and I agree with all you guys that I think the Timberwolves should be kind of hovering around that panic button. Because, and I think the organization in itself is kind of giving Thibodeau a lot of leeway because he did bring them to a successful season, their most successful season in 13 years.
Right.
And I think that's the reason why they're just letting them, oh, well, you want Derrick Rose here? You can have Derrick Rose. Oh, you want Luol Deng here? You can have Luol Deng. You know, for whatever reason, I kind of in my mind think that, you know, Luol Deng and Derrick Rose are like Tom Thibodeau's, like, he feels like they're like his illegitimate sons or whatever, and he just feels like he needs to take care of them, and he feels that way about Joakim Noah and Jimmy Butler. I mean, even though Jimmy Butler is a good piece for the team, but I think everybody from that former Bulls squad, where they went up to the Eastern Conference Finals, I think he has a huge soft spot for them, and I think he just kind of has it in his head like, hey, like, I'm going to look out for you guys. Oh, you're going to get waived by the Lakers? I got you. Come over here.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to get waived by the Cavs, Derek? Come on over. You know, like, there's still a home for you in my arms. Signed, Tom Thibodeau. You know, and I think the Timberwolves are kind of letting him get away with that, and I think it's about to. I think that leash is about to get shortened if they just don't have, if there's not that much growth from last season. If there's not that much growth from last season, and you know there's still problems, and you know, like, and to what John was saying, I definitely see Karl Anthony Towns just up and leaving after this season, just saying, you know what, screw you guys. You know what, Jimmy, like I'm tired of all your crap. Like, you know, like I'm tired of all this. Like Anthony Towns needs to think. Like he needs to think. He needs to think that like, hey, like, do I even need this right now? Because I'm like probably arguably top 3 in the league in centers. And although he does need to make that jump, that Anthony Davis like jump, there's more than enough teams in the league that are willing to pay him that money.
Right.
And yeah, so I think the Timberwolves need to be careful. Need to be careful here. And they need to kind of get things together, and they're going to have to show some growth. But you know, the good on the bright side, Jimmy Butler only played
With 59 games?
like 59 games.
Yeah.
He only played 59 games, and they're considerably better when Jimmy Butler is on the floor. And Wiggins needs to do better, but they got good pieces. They got good pieces there. You know, Taj is still very serviceable, and he was very productive last season. So, like they have good pieces there to do better and to make it work. But if things don't change, you know, by next season, you could wind up having Jimmy Butler gone, Karl Anthony Towns gone, and then after that, what do you have? You have Jeff Teague and Luol Deng for your team,
And Andrew Wiggins, yeah.
and Andrew Wiggins. Like, so you got to be careful. You got to, if Tibbs is thinking about bringing Kirk Heinrich around, just tell him no. You know.
Okay. Ed, you had a good point there where everyone's running Tom Thibodeau's defense now in the league, where it's, you know, you're getting multiple people who can switch onto off a screen and roll, and you get everyone trying to force other teams into the corner, or the offensive team into the corner, and then make them pass out of the corner. It's kind of, I think Tom has not adapted his style at all. And that's kind of a shame, because when he was here in Chicago, yeah, he was great because he was running guys into the ground, but the Bulls were winning, and they were making it tough for every team every night. It just kind of, again, embodied Tom's style of coaching, and the way the Bulls were playing at that time embodied kind of Chicago and how we like to see our sports teams around here, where they're very hard-nosed and they play good defense, and they might not score a whole lot of points, but it's really tough for the other team to score, period. And you know you were in a fight when you left your game. And so that's kind of, I think now, you know, 7 years later, from when Tom was a rookie head coach, the NBA is so much different now, just with how the shooting revolution has happened, and it's tough for Tom Thibodeau to coach teams to play the style of defense that he wants. I mean, it's just, and then at the same point, Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, yeah, they don't want to play any defense. They just want to get out there and just kind of do their thing. Leads me to my next point, specifically about Andrew Wiggins. Is this guy a bust? Is Andrew Wiggins, he did average 17 points a game last year. He's third leading scorer on the team. That's a team that went to the playoffs. He had a pretty poor series against the Houston Rockets. I'm going to start with Garnick on this point. Is Andrew Wiggins not just overrated, but did the Timberwolves make a terrible mistake in signing him long term?
Yes, they did. This guy was number 1 pick overall out of Kansas, and he was supposed to be the next great thing. That whole draft, actually, the top 2 picks.
Pretty interesting, right? Yep.
Indeed, and they end up in our conversation today.
Mm-hmm, yep.
But those top 2 picks were supposed to be phenomenal eventually. They're supposed to be franchise-type players. Wiggins somehow got paid. I don't know how. He never took a step up from his rookie year, if you think about it, you know?
Kind of, yeah.
Not a tangible, substantial leap, you know? He kind of crept up his scoring a little bit, didn't do much else on defense, yet he still got paid, and he was for a while considered like a cornerstone. And at this stage in the game, it's clear that he is overpaid. He can't call him a bust because he got paid, you know. And perhaps if he goes to another team, he could average, 20 points, 25 points. But if you compare him to the expectations people had of him, he is definitely a bust. And I'm guilty of that. I really thought that he could be one of the people that carried the NBA into the next decade.
Yep.
Into the 2020s. I thought he could be a top 5 player, but he is very far from that. He's not even in the top 50, and it's 4 years in?
Yeah, he's entering his 5th season.
Yeah. It's a disappointment. It's definitely a disappointment. The jury is somehow still out if he's a bust.
Yeah, Wiggins is... Man, it's a tough subject. But he's still the 3rd leading scorer on Minnesota at 17.5 points per game. Doesn't offer too much more than that. But yeah, I'm kind of disappointed with him. I guess the jury is still out, like how Garnick said. But unfortunately, he's stuck in this role. Maybe, I think it's just kind of unfortunate the way that his career went. I think, Zach LaVine, when Zach LaVine was on the Timberwolves, that's when everybody was nobody was really expecting LaVine to start going off. It was supposed to be Wiggins to go off. And then LaVine came in, and then I think it's a confidence issue.
With Wiggins?
With Wiggins.
Okay.
I think it's a confidence issue. He's athletic enough to be there. I know even before he was drafted, I was like, dude, this guy is going to be good. This guy's going to be really good.
Yeah, you weren't the only one.
Yeah, but I think it's when he got into the league, I think there were people who were bigger and stronger than him and just more skilled and more polished, and it kind of intimidated him a little bit. And he does show signs of him being special at certain points during the season. He definitely had a couple really good games last year, but as far as consistent production goes, he just doesn't have it. Not right now.
Okay.
Maybe he needs a change of scenery, but yeah. I think I can't call him a bust.
Okay.
I can't call him a bust because he did get paid, but he's a huge disappointment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of fair. Ed, you go ahead and take this one, and then we'll go to John.
I agree. I don't think Andrew Wiggins is a bust. I think he's an underachiever, a dramatic underachiever at that. And at the same time, I understand why Minnesota kept him, because Minnesota isn't really a premier free agent market. I mean, think about it. When's the last time any big free agent has ever said, hey, I'm going to Minnesota? I have to be there. So when you get a guy like Andrew Wiggins who, had this, reputation before the NBA as this premier prospect, people were talking about this guy as one of the next greats. He was the next LeBron, or he was a healthy Tracy McGrady, or he was Grant Hill. He was a lot of things. And, Minnesota is still looking at him as that. And Jonathan Givony of Draft Express made a good point, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but he said that once a player in high school or college develops this, stature of reputation, it takes a long, long time for it to go away. And NBA teams continue to value that player at that stature. I mean, you think about it. Michael Beasley has not really done a whole lot in the NBA, but he's still cashing checks. because he's Michael Beasley. He's a former number 2 overall pick. We look at this past draft with Michael Porter Jr., who did nothing in college, had a significant back surgery, but still went in the first round. And he's still going to get, even if his career doesn't pan out, teams are still going to look at him as, oh, that's Michael Porter Jr. That's the guy who was supposed to be the next Kevin Durant. We have to get this guy. We can pay him. Like, Andrew Wiggins is kind of going through that. He's still Andrew Wiggins. He's 22 years old. Minnesota doesn't have a big free agent, following, so they paid him. And I think the problems with Wiggins right now are twofold. On one side, I think that he has the wrong coach for him. I just don't see the fit. Again, Thibodeau took over a team that just does not seem to really buy into him. Towns and Wiggins don't seem excited to play for him. They don't reflect his values as a coach. So to me, you're not gonna maximize Wiggins with Thibodeau. On the other hand, I think Wiggins' problem is that he just doesn't do anything really well as skill wise. I mean, he's a volume scorer with, pedestrian efficiency. Defensively, he doesn't really do much at all. He doesn't really rebound the ball well. He doesn't really play make well. Honestly, the best thing you could say about Andrew Wiggins that's been impressive about him through his 4 years is that he's only missed one game. I mean, that's really impressive if you think about it. He's only missed one game. But everything else has just kind of been, volume related. Honestly, there is not a big difference really basketball player wise between Andrew Wiggins and Zach LaVine. I mean, as Bulls fans, some of us have been kind of outraged that Zach LaVine is making $20 million. Well, Andrew Wiggins is making $33 million over the next 5 years annually. So it's crazy when you think about it. So again, I don't think Andrew Wiggins is a bust, but he's clearly just a dramatic underachiever to this point.
Okay. John, go ahead. John's got a lot to say.
We'll see about that. I agree with everybody here. I'm not going to call him a bust right now. I will add onto Ed's point that I think he did walk around with like a imaginary crown in his head when he came into the league. I think people expected, Wiggins expected whatever team he went on to bow down to him and give him the ball and automatically give him that premier scoring responsibility, and it just simply doesn't work like that. I also think in terms of his game, he hasn't really added anything to his game, really.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a decent shooter, but his percentage is terrible.
Right.
Also, you can look at it like physically, he just didn't get any bigger. He still stayed the same. His build is still the same from when he got drafted. So it's not like he dedicated himself to getting better physically or adding more wrinkles to his game. So I don't really feel bad for the guy. I wish he could show his potential and maximize it, but I don't think he will with the Timberwolves. I think he needs to go somewhere else where they need to another team where they are rebuilding and they can use him as a primary scoring threat.
Okay. All right. I think Ed and both John kind of said the same things. That Ed said that Andrew Wiggins doesn't have the right coach, and Tom Thibodeau. And I think that's more for Andrew Wiggins' mentality. I think that's kind of like what we're both alluding to. And John said that Andrew Wiggins needs to go to another place where he can become a premier scoring option because, like Ed alludes to, once a certain player achieves a certain status, these NBA teams just get obsessed with it. And I think that's twofold. I think the same player has that same mentality, where Andrew Wiggins probably has that same mentality that he's had his whole life. He's been the premier scoring option on whatever team he's been on. When he was a rookie in Minnesota, they lost a ton of games, but he was Rookie of the Year because he was the number one option, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, but going to everyone's point, he's not yet a bust. It's pretty close, though. This is a make or break year for Andrew. His 5th season. He's making $33 million. He's got to live up to that contract this year, at least in one or two ways. He either becomes the number one scoring option on the Timberwolves, where it's night in, night out, he's averaging 25, or he becomes an all-defensive team player, which he definitely can be, but skill-wise, Andrew Wiggins athletically should be on a defensive team. He should have been on an all-defensive team already. But it's his mentality, and that could go along with his coach. Where
Effort.
It could be just his effort where he just doesn't care for it, which is crazy to me. But if you've been the number one scoring option your whole life and you think that's all you can do is just score, but you can do it kind of. But really, Andrew Wiggins, if he just hones in defensively, he can be one of the best defenders in the NBA just because of his athleticism.
Remember that rumor of DeMar DeRozan, Andrew Wiggins swap? That would have been something. I think that could have been the spark that Andrew Wiggins needed going back home.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
you don't
it's
want
true.
to disappoint your fans at home, but alas, that will never be, or at least won't be in the next few years.
Right. So let's go to the Timberwolves over-under for next year. Last year, the Timberwolves were 47-35. Garnick set the bar.
This is ridiculous, especially when you consider that it was 37.5 for the 9th seed in the East.
Yep.
I gotta go 44.5.
44.5. John, let's start with you. What do you
Go
got?
500, 41 and 41.
So you got under?
Yeah.
Okay.
Under 41 and 41 for me.
Garnick, go ahead.
I will go under as well. I'm gonna say 40, 43, possibly 44. I think they're the odd team out. The West is just so stacked. For the same reason that the Bulls might make the playoffs, the Timberwolves might miss the playoffs.
Yep. Yeah. Ed, what do you think? Over, under 44.5.
This is a tricky one. I'm gonna say under, and yeah, I'm gonna say slightly as well because again, the West is just really competitive, and if Minnesota is the odd man out here, it'll be like last season where it's just barely. So I'll say under, like 40. I'll say 43.
Okay. All right, Raul, what do you think? 44.5.
I'm gonna go under,
Man.
and they're gonna be still tipping on fofos. Gonna say they're gonna win 44 wins.
Oh, wow. Slightly under. Okay. All right. I am going to say over. I'm going to go 46 because last year Denver missed it by 46. They were 46 and what?
Yeah, 46 and 87.
40, nice. Denver had 46 wins last year, and I'm going to say Minnesota has the exact same. I think that it's just kind of
36,
that's how it is.
36.
No, 46 this year for
No,
Minnesota.
46 and 36.
Oh, that was the number. Thanks, man. Good math. Good job.
Hey, thanks.
Okay, so there you have it, everybody. Those are our 9 seeds for this year. Thank you for joining Contested Layups tonight. Ed, thank you for coming on, my man.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Ed.
No problem, man. This was a great time. Appreciate you having me on your podcast. Likewise, you're welcome to come back to Bulls Gold as well. Had a blast talking with you guys on both of them. So, yeah, just really excited for the upcoming season and talking about some Bulls. So, thank you guys.
Yeah, we are too, man. Remember to check out Bulls Gold on iTunes. It's another great Bulls podcast. My boy Ed runs it. So, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Hasta luego.
See you guys.